You're sitting at table 1 of your locals, staring down the best deck in the format. You've got your techs and your siding ready, but you're not playing the meta. You're playing your favorite. How do you actually win this? While you may not think it, there are ways you are at an advantage here. Because while they've spent all week practicing the mirror match, they haven't spent a single second thinking about your specific win condition. You have a magic bullet. If only you can hit them with it. Now you're in a situation that can be described as knowledge asymmetry. Strategically, especially in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh!, this is an incredible advantage. You know their every move, but they're going to struggle to keep up with you. It may be hard to exploit, but follow these tips and you'll be outwitting these players in no time. First, one of the most important things is what is commonly known about your deck, and if you can use that to your advantage. For instance, take Synchros! Everybody knows you have to negate Junk Speeder. This means that players are extremely likely to hold their interaction when you know they absolutely need to negate something else. For instance, they're unlikely to use their Imperm on Stardust Synchron because they're saving it for Junk Speeder. However, you can use that to search Junk Signal and negate whatever they chain to Speeder. It's possible they aren't even aware of the existence of some of your deck's newer support, so use the way your deck may have changed since they last looked at it to help you win. This is just one example, but using this to your advantage is critical to winning these matchups. Because information about your deck is very limited, it's likely that they will interact in ways that are unlikely to affect you as much as they could. However, this is a double-edged sword. Because they're essentially interacting at random, they may find what they need to hit by pure chance. This brings us to our second point, baiting. In order to become a true master at it, you need to understand what scares people. In my experience, the things people will want to interact with are 1. Effects that add a card they know or have heard of. Players will treat anything familiar as something they think they need to interact with. This makes your sub-engines incredible for baiting interaction, especially if your deck's regular starters are also in your hand. 2. Effects that special summon another monster, especially from the deck. Summoning directly from the deck triggers what can only be described as a primal panic, because it threatens immediate, exponential combo growth. Since players are trained to view these effects as critical choke points, they'll often fire off their negates on autopilot to try and stop the swarm. Little do they know, you don't need it. 3. Effects that add a card they have never heard of. Adding an obscure card shatters your opponent's mental and forces them into cognitive overload. Rather than risking a secret degenerate combo that they don't understand, a lot of players will panic negate the threats so they don't have to read them. 4. Effects that draw multiple cards. Raw advantage terrifies players. The moment you activate a draw 2 effect, your opponent will aggressively throw their interaction at it because they fear what you might draw into. They'll often try to interact with the draw effect even if letting it resolve would leave them with interaction for your actual combo pieces. 5. Effects that send a card directly from the deck to the graveyard. Experienced players know that the graveyard is, at this point, just a second hand. The moment you use a Foolish Burial style effect, alarms go off in your opponent's head because cards sent to the graveyard usually have extending effects or can even fully start a lot of modern decks. 6. Effects that target their cards. Survival Instinct is a powerful bait. If you activate an effect, even a relatively low impact one, that directly targets the monster they just spent their turn making, they will almost always fire off that monster's effect to protect it, even if that isn't correct. You can use a disposable card to force them to burn their best disruption. 7. The Telegraphed Normal Summon. Because you only get one normal summon per turn, usually, opponents view it as a massive choke point. If you normal summon a monster that has a search or special summon effect, they will instinctively try to crush it, assuming your turn ends if it fails. This is the perfect bait when your hand is secretly full of special summons that don't need the normal summon to pop off. All of these are effective baits, but are also useful if and when they resolve. There is, however, one special move that is potentially even more powerful, but incredibly risky. But first, I noticed that not all of you who are watching are subscribed. I'll give you a moment to press the button. And like too. Okay, let's move on. 8. Attempting to leave the main phase. Simply saying, end of main phase, can force interaction without you actually using any resources. It signals the devastating board wipe evenly matched is coming, or potentially representing the ability to out effects that only work during the main phase, like Blazing Cartesia, that you're planning to use in the battle phase. Opponents will frequently panic and activate their onboard effects prematurely just to get some value out of them before they are hypothetically destroyed or banished. Then, after they're done panicking, you can just stay in the main phase. Your next advantage is one that is maybe harder to see from your own side, and it's just that. The modern side deck is constructed to contain tools to handle the top decks of the format, with specific text to defeat particular mechanics found in those decks. You have the advantage of both getting to play these cards in your own side deck and render their text completely useless. If the side deck is like a sidearm to the deck's primary weapon, you've swapped 75% of their bullets for blanks. Take for instance a card like Artifact Lancia. This is incredibly powerful into decks that rely on banishing cards, and will be in most side decks where these decks are prevalent and powerful. If that isn't a core part of your deck strategy, you have effectively removed 3 cards from their side deck before the match even starts. You also have another bizarre advantage, though this one really only applies in longer tournaments. At a certain point in the day, players who have been performing well are starting to reach a mental limit. Obviously, this will vary from opponent to opponent and isn't one you can regularly rely on, but noticing your opponent is only skimming, or perhaps not even reading your cards, is the ultimate chance to really flex your knowledge advantage. Because you know how they'll be thinking, for example, they're likely to be waiting for a card that really screams, "Negate me!" You can very easily get to a point of assured victory before they've even realized they should have stopped you much earlier. But don't just take my word for it. We've got a special guest, and friend of the channel, Revs Cards here, who can attest that these points are absolutely key to finding success in high-level tournaments. Hi Revs.
Yo, what's good man? Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here on the Judgeman Dragon channel finally.
Great to have you on the channel. First, what's your pet deck at the moment, and how do you use what your opponents might not know against them?
Yeah, of course. So my pet deck is Red Dragon Archfiend forever and always. Much better deck than those stinky Synchrons, you know. But yeah, while my locals are kind of starting to catch on with where to stop the deck, at big events or like on Master Duel for example, you can always kind of get a read for whether your opponent actually knows what's happening or not. In cases like that, you can sometimes switch up your sequencing to try and bait a hand trap on like a redundant search. Although sometimes that can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you do something silly to try and bait an Ash Blossom and then get hit with a Droll and Lockbird on resolution, it doesn't feel too great. I do think that typically you want to play your turn assuming that your opponent does know how your deck works, but it's always good to hit them with a surprise play that they didn't expect.
We were just talking about the psychology of playing longer events and how players will start to go on autopilot after a long day. Since you are constantly bringing rogue strategies to tournaments, what's the most memorable time an opponent lost a game just because they refused to read one of your obscure cards?
Yeah, so once again, going back to Red Dragon Archfiend, I think the Crimson King is like the perfect example in this situation. So for those who don't know what the Crimson King does, on summon, it searches for any card that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend from the deck, and then it also has a separate effect where in response to one of your opponent's monster effects, it can banish itself for cost to summon out an indestructible 6000 attack Red Dragon Archfiend from the extra deck. You'll occasionally run into a duelist who either forgets the effect after you tell them, or just simply doesn't read the full effect text and will attempt to drop something like an effect veiler on the Crimson King. So you can then just chain the Crimson King to tag itself out into Red Dragon Archfiend and essentially dodge that effect veiler, so they've just lost a card out of their hand for nothing. This also comes up going second. For example, I had an opponent once ash my Crimson King effect, which is fine, but because I'm going second, I just tagged out the Crimson King into a 6000 attack Red Dragon Archfiend and attacked them for game. So yeah, you gotta really be on the ball when you're playing against a deck you don't really know.
So, we've talked a lot about the advantages of knowledge asymmetry. But what happens when you sit down at table 1 and it turns out your opponent actually knows exactly how your deck works? Do you have any advice on how to pivot when they know exactly where your real choke points are?
So when you're playing against an opponent who knows how your deck works and where to stop it, it can be pretty difficult, you know, because provided they have the correct cards to stop you, by definition, a choke point is a choke point. There's no way around it. It's like your junk speeder getting hand trapped and you having no way to stop that. I mean, you have more tools to stop that now with things like junk signal, but in the past, junk speeder getting hit with anything was just curtains. Ideally, you want to build your deck in a way that it doesn't have a choke point like that, or at least at the very minimum, you want to at least have a game plan for when you get stopped at your choke point. In modern times, that would unfortunately mean putting additional engines into your deck and risk being called a slop deck, but it can also be true when playing just in archetype as well. Again, going back to Red Dragon Archfiend, I'm not going to stop talking about Red Dragon Archfiend. Previously, before the support we got in Blazing Dominion, if you got hand trapped on your normal summon Soul Resonator or your Red Rising Dragon to bring back the Crimson Resonator, or heck, even your Bone Archfiend, that would very typically just end your turn. With the new support after Blazing Dominion, you can build the deck in a way that all of your combos don't really have a key choke point. However, a lot of the Red Dragon Archfiend player base, typically anime fans or casuals, so you can't really blame them, they'll want to stick to the old choke points in order to bring out some of the newer, bigger boss monsters, which results in them losing more games, of course. So maybe a little bit of a tangent here, but the answer is basically to switch up your deck building if possible.
Many players can just copy the latest tournament winning list when the format changes, but as a rogue player, you're on your own. How do you adapt and evolve your pet deck to survive when a brand new powerful strategy enters the format?
It really just depends on what the new meta deck is. For example, the answer to Cool Tune is pick up their cards and eat them. I'm trying to synchro summon, man. Leave my levels alone. Stop changing them. But on a more serious note, once again, it comes down to your deck building. When a new meta threat enters the field, you know, you want to change up your non-engine, your hand trap lineup so that you're more equipped to deal with that new threat. But it's also a good opportunity to look at the extended card pool your deck is able to access. Whether that be additional utility extra deck options that you wouldn't normally play, or, you know, changing your supplementary engine. It's not easy, that's unfortunately just the difficulty of playing a rogue deck, but if you do your research and build your deck for the meta, it gives you your best chances at standing up against those decks. A recent example is, again, going back to Red Dragon Archfiend, Trap Eater. This is a card that can be searched by your engine through something like Soul Resonator or Crimson Call, and with the rise of continuous trap cards in the meta through things like Tunes and Ritual of Light and Darkness, it's a fun little tool that you can use to help break those meta boards. Alternatively, you can just ignore all of that and simply pray that you don't get paired against that deck in your tournament.
Thanks, Revs.
Absolutely, man. I'll take any opportunity to speak about Red Dragon Archfiend. Thanks for having me.
Huge shout out to Revs Cards for dropping by and sharing some top tier wisdom. Make sure to check out his channel, linked down below if you haven't already. So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? The top tables are dominated by players who rely on predictability, and predictability is exactly what you are going to circumvent. By weaponizing their lack of knowledge, mastering the psychological art of the bait, and taking full advantage of their dead side deck cards, you can turn their meta-focused preparation into a liability. The top decks might have the raw power, but you have the element of surprise. When it comes to success, Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't just about playing the cards, it's about playing the player. I want to hear from you down in the comments. What's the funniest way you've ever completely baited an opponent's interaction? If you enjoyed the video and feel a little more ready to start winning more, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss a video. Until next time, keep playing what you love, trust in your techs, and I'll see you at the top tables. Oh, and don't forget to call a judge.